We all know how short life is. After all, the mortality rate is still tracking at 100%. Even though this life is short, we still don't want it to suck. This podcast is all about tools and insights from psychology, philosophy, and spirituality to help this journey suck less. In fact, we may even learn how to embrace the life we have while creating the life we want. I'm Morgan, and this is the PS We Expire podcast. I'm so glad you're here. 3 beliefs for a happier life. All of us want to be happier. I don't think that that's probably something that's unique to me. I think all of us are looking for our lives not just to suck less, but to have more happiness. And so I want to share with you today 3 beliefs for a happier life. The first one, the first belief is that I am not a problem to be solved. Marketers, advertisers, and people even within religion or spiritual circles lean heavy into the belief that you are somehow broken and that they have the answer to the problems, the solutions to the problems, and the biggest problem is you, that there's something wrong with you. And my product or service or belief is going to fix you. So, number one, a belief for a happier life is to believe that you are not a problem to be solved. I could go a million different directions with this idea. We could go the biological route that says everything that happens in your body helps determine your behavior, helps determine the way that you think about things. So, what is happening in your body now? What was happening in your body as you were in fetal development? What happened in your genes as they were still in your parents and in your ancestors all contribute to how you are right now. We could look at it from a sociological perspective, like you are a product of the culture that you were born in. So if you happen to be born in the United States, like I was, I am a product of the culture that I was born into, the belief systems that I have, the way that I think about money, the way that I think about relationships is all part and parcel of the culture that I grew up in. So if I happen to be born in a different century, in a different country, speaking a different language, I would behave differently. I would have a different way of thinking about things. And my point with this first one is that all of those things are true, certainly, but that people try to benefit and profit off of you by making you believe that there's something wrong with you, that you need to take advantage of a product that they offer in order to fix something that is fundamentally broken inside of you. And so having a shift from a belief that at your core, at your root, that you are broken, that you are bad, that you are deficient somehow, if you can switch that belief into that you are not a problem to be solved, you are not someone who's broken and needs to be put back together, but that you are a complicated, nuanced, full of life human being that is complex, and that at your core, you are good. That can undo so much of the programming that we have been raised to believe is true. If we can shift that inner dialogue instead of constantly trying to find things that can bolster this belief about ourselves that there's something wrong with us, we start to look at life differently. Because if we have an underlying belief that there's something wrong with us, let me tell you a little bit about this beautiful part of our brains that when we give it something to do, it's like, sweet, I'm going to do that. This is how this works. If I have a belief, an underlying belief that I am bad, that I'm broken, my brain is going to go, okay, I will find evidence to support that belief. So you will notice things that compound the belief that you're broken. And this only increases our sense of worthlessness, only increases our sense of brokenness. So we need to start to shift things on the inside, train our brains to look for evidence that actually supports the opposite. And that right there is probably one of the first big hurdles into building a happier life, is to really wrestle with and tackle with any of those deep-seated beliefs that we have about ourselves being broken. So that's the first one. The second belief for a happier life is I need support. This is such a good belief to have. If you have been raised in a hyper individualistic culture, like a Western culture like I have been raised in, we have this belief that like we just have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we just have to be motivated and we have to be in charge and we have to be in control and I can do it myself. I can do it myself. And the reality is that not only are we a social species, but we also cannot thrive without supportive relationships. There's a great therapist and writer named Lori Gottlieb, and she said that if anyone comes to her and they're suffering from depression, the very first question that she asks them is, "Are you surrounded by assholes?" And it's so true. If we are really struggling, that's probably a good first place to look. Is do you have people in your life that are supportive of you? Are they supportive of your dreams? Are they supportive of your growth? And this doesn't mean that you have people in your life that are always saying, "Oh my god, you're the best. Anything that you do, you can do no wrong." Like that's not what I'm talking about, but people who genuinely support the challenges that you put forth for yourself, the growth that you want to have, the impact that you want to have in the world, and the way that you want to develop your character, the way that you want to grow into the person that you know you can be. Do you have people in your life like that? If we are going through life with this belief that I can do it myself, oftentimes the root beneath that belief that's almost like a false wall, which behind is this belief that we are alone. Now if you have a belief that you are broken and that there's something wrong with you, then it makes sense, it tracks that an underlying belief of that is I'm going to be alone because who's going to want a broken bad person. So if you tend to be someone who is not relying on anybody else and you feel like I can do it myself, you might want to dig into that a little bit and see if beneath that belief is a fear that if you let people see who you really are, that you're going to be alone. Or perhaps you have tried to rely on people in the past and they've let you down. Perhaps you had a childhood where you learned really quickly that you couldn't rely on the primary caregivers in your life. And whether or not that's true is kind of irrelevant because as kids, we go through developmental stages where anything that is wrong that happens out here in our environment, we have to internalize that as that there's something wrong with me. Because what would it be like for a kid to go through life thinking that the world out here is bad? Like that is more terrifying than adopting a belief that somehow I'm the problem. So the second one, I need support. If this is a belief that is difficult for you, I would suggest doing a little bit of investigating and seeing if the hyper individualization, this pushing people away, pushing support away, or feeling like you can't rely on anybody else stems from some of those deep seated fears of being alone. We need people in our lives. We need to rely on other people. We need to have their support. And I do think that sometimes as you are growing and changing, that support system has to change, which can be extremely painful as some of the old relationships have to shift and maybe not be as big of a part of your story anymore. Some of them maybe need to not be a part of your story at all as you heal and you grow. But I do think that our greatest growth happens in relationships because think about this. Like I thought that I was an incredibly patient person until I had children. And I was like, holy shit, like I'm not very patient at all. I have a I have kind of a short fuse. I like things to be a certain way and I did not know that before I had children. It wasn't until I had relationships that pushed me in different ways and kind of like rankled me in different ways that I started to uncover things about myself that I didn't know were there. And the different relationships that we have are going to highlight certain parts of ourselves that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. So not only do we need our relationships for support as we grow and support as we undo all of this like yucky false programming or false stories that we've been told our entire lives and that we continue to tell ourselves. Not only do we need relationships to heal, but we also need relationships to poke and prod at us a little bit and show us areas that we didn't know needed attention, that we didn't know needed to grow, that we didn't know needed to heal. So all of the best parts of that happen in relationship. So that's number 2 of our 3 beliefs for a happier life is I need support. Number 3, a belief for a happier life is I find my purpose by following my joy. I find my purpose by following my joy. There is this kind of like I love that this is part of our human evolution right now. This self-actualization, these questions about our life's purpose, I don't think throughout the majority of human history that as many people asked that. And I think that kind of like along with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So at the very bottom of the hierarchy of needs, we have like our most basic needs for security, for our physical necessities, food, shelter. And as you go up the ladder, we have, supportive relationships, and at the top, we have self actualization. And I think that this is in this time that we are living longer, that we are living healthier because the majority of the world, I would think, has access to their basic needs. There is obviously like a tremendous percentage of people in the world that are still lacking basic necessities like food and clean water. So I'm not ignoring that or saying that that's not still a huge problem. But I do think that at this point in history, we have just we have our minds freed up to ask the bigger questions, the more abstract questions, these questions about what is my purpose in the world, and this pursuit of self-actualization that I don't think really existed to the same extent for such a large percentage of the population until this point. So we have many, many more people who are wrestling with this idea and this question and a sense of wanting to do something bigger and more important in the world than just meeting the basic needs on the bottom of that hierarchy. So we have more people that are asking this question of what is my purpose, and it's creating this like tornado of existential angst as we're like, I have to figure out what my purpose is. I have to find it. If I don't find it, then my life is meaningless. And I want to suggest that the way that we find this is by following our joy. It's not by wrestling and struggling with it, but it's really learning to listen to that internal yes, no, that internal pull, the internal leading to the things that make you feel most alive in your life. So for some people, that's going to be writing. For some people, that's gardening. For some people, that's speaking or creating films or, any number of things that makes their soul sing. And I don't want people to be mistaken in thinking that when they find that thing that it then has to be their career. No, I'm not saying that at all because sometimes our purpose is tied up in the thing that actually makes money. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's, you make money in order to fund all the other things that you really enjoy doing. I'm going to dial this back just for a hot second because I said I find my purpose singular by following my joy. And what I want to suggest is actually that it's purposes because I don't think that anybody has just a singular purpose, one thing that they do, because we are, like I said before, like we are complicated, complex, nuanced human beings with a wide variety of things that we enjoy doing. And so finding your purpose is a little bit of like it's like, I guess, trying to, like, hold on to water. It's gonna slip through your fingers. So instead, I want you to think about, how do I just pursue my joy? How do I just go after the things that, like, bring me such a deep sense of satisfaction? And for me, I mean, some of those things are having deep conversations, which is one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is because I find a deep sense of purpose and meaning in these types of conversations. I also find a deep sense of purpose and meaning in learning how to clarify my thoughts in order to present them in this format on a podcast. I find a great deal of joy in researching and reading so that I can bring new ideas to you. So my purpose in having the podcast is because I like it. I like doing it. I think that some of us grow up in an environment where we're told that you shouldn't really pay attention to whether or not something feels good. And there is definitely something to be said for that, because if we only ever pursue things that on the surface feel good, then we would only ever eat junk food, because, like, our biology is working in our favor to eat lots of junk food. That's just how it goes. Our brains love the dopamine, our brain loves the quick carbohydrates and all of that. So, there is something to be said about that. But what I'm talking about is, like, when you come in contact with an activity or a way of thinking that resonates so deeply that it's unmistakable, really, and that you can see how doing that thing or pursuing this way of thinking will actually improve your relationships. It improves your health, physical, mental, spiritual, psychological health, that it just brings a lot of vitality to your life. This is what I'm talking about. So, as you're pursuing things that are like that, is when you will continue to find your purposes, that your life will be more fulfilling as you pursue those things that are deeply meaningful and satisfying to you. That is a belief that you can adopt in order to have a happier life. I'm going to throw a fourth one in here. Okay, the fourth one is perhaps a little bit difficult to swallow, but the fourth one is, everything is for my good. When we go through really hard things, it's difficult to believe this. It's difficult to believe that the hard thing that we're going through is for our benefit. It's extremely difficult to choose to believe that. When I came to this understanding that there are very, very few provable things in this world, that that means that I get to behave in a way as if something is true, even if I can't prove that it's true. I started to think about my beliefs differently. So what I mean by that, in context of this fourth one, that everything is for my good, I don't have any way to prove that. I don't have any, you know, words that have been divinely inspired. I don't have any I don't have any scientific evidence that this belief is true, that everything happens for my good. I could just as easily believe that everything happens for my bad, that the whole world is against me, that everything is happening in order to drag me down and destroy me. I could also believe that everything is ambiguous, everything is arbitrary, right? I could believe that there isn't any point to anything. I could just as easily believe any of those three things. But the question is, which thing do I want to believe that helps me live my life in a way that makes the most sense to me, that also just feels the best? Because again, like, if I can't prove it, then why would I choose to believe something that just feels so terrible? The belief that everything happens for my good I would never force that belief on somebody else, and I would never tell them in the midst of some of the most difficult things in their life, like, "This is happening for your good." Like, I wouldn't say that. This is a belief that I have come to because it works really well for me. Having this belief helps me view even the hardest things as a positive thing for me to become a more compassionate, loving, empathetic person towards others and myself. One of the most clear examples of this, and if you've been around this podcast or anywhere that I hang out online at all, you already know about my daughter Annie. Annie had a rare genetic disease that slowly stripped away her skills over the 14 short years of her life. And I would do all of that over again in a heartbeat, 1,000 times over. Yes, I would choose that life with Annie over and over and over again, even though the grief, the depths of grief and heartache that came with being being a mother to a daughter with this disease, is indescribable. And having her die, indescribable. And so much love, so much love, so much learning, so much connection, so many new developed relationships as a result of this disease. And so I could choose to look at her disease as the worst thing that ever happened to me, the worst thing that could have possibly happened to her. I don't have any evidence of that. I mean, I guess I'd have just as much evidence of that as I do evidence that it's the best thing that ever happened to me. So if I have a choice, which of those things to believe, because I do have a choice, why wouldn't I choose to believe the better thing? Why wouldn't I choose to believe the thing that helps me continue to show up in my life? Why wouldn't I choose the thing that helps me alchemize the heartache into something spectacular? Why didn't I choose a belief that helps me just be able to like almost like put the experience in a strainer and allow what pours out to be goodness and love and meaning? And some days it is work to choose that. Some days it would be way easier to believe that everything is meaningless. And what's the point? What's the point of it all? Um, yeah, some days it's harder work. Uh, but overall, I'm really glad that I choose that every day. So I flipped this episode on its head a little bit by adding a fourth one. But these beliefs can lead you to a happier life. The first one again is I'm not a problem to be solved. The second belief is I need support. The third one is I find my purposes by following my joy. And the fourth one is everything that happens is for my good. So, thank you for joining me for this episode of the PS We Expire podcast. If this was helpful to you, if this is impacting you in a positive way, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you either on the socials, send me an email. All my contact information is in the show notes and share it with a friend if this was helpful to you. I would love to hear specifically about if there was any one point in particular that shifted things for you a little bit to be able to change your belief system around how you feel about yourself, how you feel about others, how you feel about life in general, that you can tell is going to create a positive impact and lead you to a happier life. So thank you again for joining me. And before we go, PS.